There he
They were
is.
the better football team. Does it matter that it was 31-7? Does it matter if it was 28-27? Does it matter at all the margin of victory, or does it just come down less to the fact that the Eagles were the better football team and they're heading to the Super Bowl, and we should just leave it at that?
Well, ultimately, we're going to leave it at that because, we're not going to spend the next 2 weeks debating the final score. But I do think it would have been better. It would have been better for everybody if we'd been able to see the game we were expecting to see yesterday. That if they hadn't run out of quarterbacks, if they'd at least been allowed to play Josh Johnson the whole game, it was unfortunate. There has been an awful lot of focus on it, though, and someone brought up last night when the Eagles lost Carson Wentz early. What was it? After 2 series into the Seattle playoff game, and 500-year-old Josh McCown, ended up not being able to score any points. Nobody was like, "Oh my God, Seattle!" They had no business.
Well, you know why,
that
Les?
Yeah.
Because Josh finished the game. He tore his hamstring, by the way.
Yeah.
And he finished the game. Now, there's going to be, I imagine this isn't 49ers 365, but, I imagine we're going to see what's wrong with Brock Purdy. And if it's not significant, there's going to be a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think there was a report last night, John, that it was ulnar ligament.
Yeah, so
he might end up with like Tommy John surgery or something, which is really awful.
Yeah,
and from the, it's football is so weird. I mean, the first couple times you watch that replay, you're just looking to see if the ball is out before his hand is moving forward.
Yeah.
Then you're thinking, okay, he hurt his wrist or something, and it took after they said it was elbow, then I started looking at his elbow. I thought, oh yeah, but it wasn't like some vicious, terrible.
No, and that's the thing. It was a clean hit.
Yeah.
And, that's just football. And obviously Josh Johnson comes in the game, gets a concussion in the third quarter, which again, it was a clean hit. It wasn't really anything that was questionable from a
and if the spotter hadn't noticed it, they wouldn't have taken him out of the game. They wouldn't have shown a replay of it. I mean, it was just a guy going backwards with his head, which is one of the problems we have in football is, good Lord, if that causes a concussion, there's got to be a way to.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a lot of discussion over this game. In playoff games, Les, we went through it last year with Kansas City Buffalo, and everybody got upset because Josh Allen didn't get a chance to have the ball in overtime, and they changed the rules.
Yep.
I think they might change the rules back to having that emergency quarterback to not have this situation again.
That makes sense to me. And of course, teams have the ability right now to activate 3 quarterbacks, but you have to go short on your special teams if you do that.
Yeah.
I would probably do that in playoff games because you really don't want to be in a situation where you don't have a quarterback. I mean,
now from the 49ers standpoint, though, they already lost 2 quarterbacks. They were down to their third quarterback to begin with. Josh Johnson's number 4. He was on the street until December. I don't even know if they have. I should have checked the practice squad. They might have one on the practice squad. So
I assume they do because Garoppolo hasn't played in forever,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Jimmy wasn't ready. They claim he might have been ready for the Super Bowl to be potentially the backup, but it's
he would have had to play the Super Bowl probably if they'd have gotten there because Brock Purdy, if that is an ulnar ligament, he wasn't going to play the Super Bowl.
That's very true. And, but there was never any question. So that was the 6th offensive play of the game for San Francisco when Hassan Reddick got what turned out to be the strip sack. From that point forward, it was pretty clear that it was more of a coronation than a game for the Eagles. So you've heard this, I'm sure, Les, throughout the season, that the Eagles have beaten a bunch of nobodies. They're the first team to get to the Super Bowl that has beaten nobody, according to some critics.
Yeah.
I've kind of changed my philosophy into what really happened is they're so good, they changed a bunch of somebodies into nobodies because they look like nobodies after the Eagles are done with them.
That's I think you're right. I've thought about that as well, especially like somebody brought up Tennessee last night. Well, who started Tennessee down the slide from 7-2? I'm pretty sure it was the Eagles. That's just a stupid thing to say. If you look at their strength of schedule, it holds up very well under the usual metrics. The metrics people are using to claim this are that, well, they caught this team at a time when it wasn't playing well, or, this guy was hurt, or, that goes both ways. They caught Arizona at a point where Arizona was actually a competitive team, which after Arizona lost Kyler Murray, it was not a competitive team. They caught, Detroit played one of its best games of the season against the Eagles, even though Detroit finished strong. Detroit played well against the Eagles. It's not a good argument. They played a lot of winning teams. They played a better schedule than San Francisco did, for the love of God. That doesn't do much for me. The way the game went yesterday was dissatisfying, because it wasn't interesting or suspenseful.
Navy showed up for the second time. Navy showed up with the running game. They couldn't pass at all. Yeah. And this is the NFC Championship game. So I'm with you. I said that on our post-game show last night, Les. I was like, I didn't learn anything about the Eagles. I already knew the Eagles were a really good team. Yeah. But this game was, 6 plays into San Francisco's offensive day. The game was over. It was over. But from that point.
All right. Since we're talking about the strength of schedule and who the Eagles played and the like, even though I know I'm running the risk of getting Eagle Nation all upset and bothered. One thing that is legit, and you're right, John and Les, both of you guys, that the Eagles' strength of schedule was what it was, and John's turn of phrase of they made somebody's into nobody's is accurate and on point. There is one thing you have to at least look at and acknowledge. Patrick Mahomes is not only the best quarterback they're going to have faced this year, he is far and away the best quarterback that they have faced this year. Yeah. They've played good teams. They played their schedule. They had to beat 2 playoff teams in their division, the Giants and the Cowboys. No other division in football had 3 teams make the playoffs like the NFC East. So it isn't like the Eagles cakewalked into this Super Bowl. They played a legit tough schedule. But within that schedule, they haven't really faced a top-flight quarterback. And you define top flight however you feel you need to. No one questions that Patrick Mahomes is just that. On one leg yesterday, he threw for over 300 yards and lifted the Kansas City Chiefs to a win and another Super Bowl appearance. That's what the question's going to be coming into this game. Can they beat one of the 2, 3, 4, 5 best quarterbacks in the National Football League? Because they haven't yet this year. They haven't had the chance. You can only beat them if you line up against them, but they haven't played a quarterback the magnitude of Patrick Mahomes. And that is a legit point leading into the Super Bowl, is it not?
Yeah, it certainly is. But I think along with that point is the other point, which is it was a miracle that Patrick Mahomes won yesterday. If that guy hadn't shoved him out of bounds at midfield there.
And by the way, there were like 2 holding calls on that play. They just didn't call.
There are. But, I'm not big on that because you can kind of – holding is called very inconsistently in the NFL.
It is. But usually when you're in the open like that and you get your arms outside the framework, that's usually when the flag.
But you have to really – I think if you just get your arm outside and it's up there for a second and you don't really yank the guy, sometimes they don't call it. I don't know. But my point is, are we going to see the real Patrick Mahomes? Because we didn't see him last night, that was painful to watch at times. It was wonderful. I mean, he made some amazing plays, but he wasn't Patrick Mahomes. He couldn't escape. He couldn't run. It was a watered down version of Patrick Mahomes with no receivers.
Right.
by the end of the game.
Les,
Are there receivers going to play in 2 weeks? Is
sure
Mahomes going to be able
sure
to walk without limping in 2 weeks?
Les, I'm sure you know the numbers. 29 of 43, 326, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. If that's the knockoff Patrick Mahomes, you better hope the Eagles don't get the real deal 2 weeks from now, because it's pretty damn impressive as the knockoff Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, absolutely. This is what, 3 and 4 years they've been to the Super Bowl. I mean, this is almost the equivalent of the Patriots when the Eagles face them, not in terms of the number of Super Bowls that they've won or anything, but in terms of domination of the AFC, this is a team that's, established as the dominant team in the AFC, I think, over the last half decade since Mahomes got there. And I think the only reason, last I saw, and you guys might have updated information, the Eagles were very slight favorites.
It's interesting.
But I think
it started out as a pick 'em, and then it went -1 for Kansas City, and all of a sudden it's like -2 for the Eagles, or 2.5. now.
I think that's the injuries. I think that's the receivers and Mahomes. I think if everyone was healthy on Kansas City, I think Kansas City would certainly be favored.
Yeah, but here's the way it went last week in the AFC Championship game. Bengals opened up the favorite because of the injuries, and as the week got on and people got to see Patrick Mahomes walk, all of a sudden Kansas City was a 1.5 favorite, went to 2 right before the game started. Why would you not think it would be the exact same this week?
Yeah, he's the most dominant player in football. He's the rightful MVP. Sorry, Eagles fans. He is different than everybody else. But guess what? There's 45 guys that got to show up with Patrick Mahomes, and those 45, the Eagles are deeper. I've talked about it all year. They're more well-rounded. They're healthier, as Les points out. And the best case scenario, you're facing the best quarterback, no question about it. But he's not healthy. He's got a high ankle sprain. And if you are going to face him, that's the best time to face him.
I think the Eagles, as good as the Bengals defense is, I really think the Eagles pass rush is better. I mean, they had more sacks.
Oh, sure.
I think he'll have more trouble if he's not mobile, if he's not the vintage Patrick Mahomes. I think he'll have a lot of trouble with the Eagles. But the Eagles' real advantage lies on the other side. They're not going to play nearly as good a defense as they played yesterday. And I don't think we really saw the real Jalen Hurts yesterday, frankly.
Well, I don't think we needed to.
Because he doesn't really want to run, I think it's affecting everything about his game. And, late in the game, you saw him break off some runs and give the offense some rhythm and stuff like that. And they need that. And I really hope with the 2 weeks that he's confident enough in his shoulder that he's going to be, real Jalen Hurts. And I don't think he was throwing it badly yesterday, but the receivers weren't getting separation. A.J. Brown did not look like A.J. Brown to me.
He's banged up too. So the 2 weeks will help him.
And Hurts was not, putting throws into tight windows and things like that, like we've seen him do. And we're going to need to see that in the Super Bowl. They're not.
You would think they would need to score more points in the Super Bowl. But I want to talk about one guy who wrecked the game, Les. And, this has been, you and I have been around this team for a while. You longer than me. Malcolm Jenkins as a free agent acquisition, Brandon Brooks, Hassan Reddick, man. Yeah. 19 sacks, 19 and a half sacks in 19 games. Leads the league in forced fumbles, strip sacks. He had a fumble recovery. One Josh Johnson, that was Hassan, who jumped on the football, ultimately turned it 14-7 to 21-7. We talk about game wreckers. Coaches always talk about game wreckers. He wrecked that game. He wrecked that game. It's only one season, but he's already one of the best free agent acquisitions in Howie Roseman's certainly stint as Eagles GM. Agree, disagree? Obviously, you already agreed, but
I agree. I just marvel at. I did a magazine story on Hassan beginning of the season, and I kind of went over all the different inflection points of his career. What a bizarre career this man had. It's unparalleled.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't a defensive end growing up. He wasn't very big. His mom decided to send him to Haddon Heights to live with his dad to be in a better school system, basically, than Camden. But Haddon Heights I live in Haddon Township, a few miles from Haddon Heights. And the level of football there, one of my kids played briefly, is really low high school football. I mean, it's tiny little guys, very small schools. And, he got hurt in high school and didn't really play, walked on at Temple, was kicked off the team. Then Matt Rule came in, and just by happenstance, there was a family connection with Matt Rule, and they got him back on the team and turned him into a pass rusher. So he becomes a first-round draft pick. So everything's great, except the Cardinals decide that he's way too small to be a pass rusher. So they make him an inside linebacker, and he's a bust. And they're going to, they decide not to pick up the option on his contract. And somebody got hurt. I can't remember now who it was. It was a guy who now plays for the Cardinals, got hurt. And they had to let him try to be a pass rusher. And he blew up and got a one-year contract with Carolina. Did very well there, but the team was a disaster. Matt Rule got fired. And here he is. And it's as strange a journey as you're ever going to come across, I think, in the NFL.
Yeah. And as well as you documented it, Les, and it's a great story of homeboy coming home and becoming a star for his hometown team. Someone tried to talk the Eagles into signing him 2 years ago when he was coming out of Arizona, and Howie Roseman didn't listen to me that year. I was glad he listened to me this year and got it done, because he is a stone cold game wrecker. You're right about that. All right, so they win 31-7. They're in position now to win another championships. We got 2 weeks build up. How much fun is it going to be, Eagles versus Andy Reid? We thought that this was a possibility a couple of years ago. If the Eagles had gotten the Chiefs lost on their way to the Super Bowl. It's now actually happening. We don't have to debate whether we should or shouldn't root for Andy Reid because he's playing someone else other than the Eagles. No, he's playing the Eagles. So Eagle Nation will not be rooting for Andy Reid. We know that ahead of time. But it should be a tremendous build-up to this game, and we'll see how it plays out. I think Andy will be a great one to cover this week for guys on the beat who are out there if they send him out to Kansas City and cover him. How does Jeff Lurie get involved this week, Les? Does he play low profile? Is he going to be made available because he's the guy who hired Andy Reid, has since replaced Andy Reid? They still got Andy Reid players here on this team that he drafted. How is Reid Lurie going to play this week, you think?
Boy, that's a good question. We've never seen anything like this. Has always been my dream matchup.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're talking about that.
By the way, Jeffrey talked after the game in the locker room, Les.
That's
now we didn't know Kansas City won at that point, but
I saw him interviewed on the field on TV. He's not one to be out there. I mean, I don't know how they're going to handle this. There are going to be a lot of requests, and there's so many. When we actually get to Super Bowl week and have the media extravaganza, where everybody is supposed to be available, there's so many people. I went through it last night on Twitter. Brett Veach, the GM, Mark Donovan, the team president, half the assistant coaches are guys that were here with Andy at one point or another. Yeah. Tom Melvin, Steve Spagnuolo. There's like half a dozen of them, and it's. And there are people, Nick Sirianni started out with the Chiefs in pro football. I mean, it's a wonderful matchup, and I'm really beside myself that I'm not going to get to cover it, frankly. But it's Andy is. It almost seems like destiny because he's such a big part of Eagles history in the 21st century. It's just. I maintain
that everything good about this organization, and this is now one of the best organizations in the NFL, stems from Andy Reid.
Yeah.
For people that don't realize that, and you can talk about this better than me because you were there when Andy was here. Their whole philosophy, build on the up front, offensive, defensive line, all of it, the way they do business, all directly correlates back to Andy Reid and his arrival in 1999.
And just the sense of professionalism and dignity and, unflappability that the organization has acquired. It really wasn't that way when Ray Rhodes and Rich Kotite and Buddy were running around. It was a very different vibe you got from the Eagles. Sirianni is very different from Andy Reid in his demeanor, but it's still, you still have that. You're not going to see a lot of real bizarre posturings from NovaCare or, impulsive moves or things. The organization has taken on that sort of steady, calm sort of atmosphere since Andy, Andy's 14 years. I mean, that's such a long time.
Yeah. How about this, Les? I'm going to throw this at you. Andy obviously is the all-time winningest coach in Eagles history. If he wins the Super Bowl, he will become the all-time winningest coach in Kansas City history. He will tie the record there. So how about that for setting up for a storyline? And we're not even getting to the Kelce brothers, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think Andy's all-time top 5 NFL coaches if he wins this.
No question.
Certainly.
No question.
And it'll be interesting to see how this goes here, because normally the Eagles aren't in the Super Bowl, obviously, when Andy is. So, and everybody's all like, boy, I hope Andy wins, blah, blah, blah. But now it's going to be Andy against the Eagles. And I think you're going to see some of the old pettiness seep out, from people who were
started.
Obviously everything didn't go great. They had all those frustrating near misses when Andy was here. And I think you're going to see more talk of that than we've had in recent years. I think that was all kind of dead and buried when the Eagles won a Super Bowl and then when Andy won a Super Bowl, but you're going to see all that resurrected again. Ad nauseam.
Back up again, completely unnecessary, but you're right. It's going to happen less. All right, let me ask you a legitimate 13 days in advance matchup between the Chiefs and Eagles question. And most times when I ask questions, I've got at least a grasp of what I think the answer is going to be. On this one, I got no clue. And I've been contemplating it for a long time, and I still got no clue. Let's see if Les Bowen can fill in the blanks for me. Travis Kelce, all apologies to Goddard and Kittle and whoever else you want to put in the mix, is the best receiving tight end in football, bar none. It's not even close. It's not even a conversation. And yet, every single game, he seems to be wide open on 5, 6, 7, 8 plays. Now, you look at that Kansas City roster, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling made a couple of big plays yesterday, and Mahomes makes players better around him. But Travis Kelce just seems to be wide open all the time. He's their best option. I know he's their best option. Every team that plays him should know he's their best option in the passing game. Yet I feel I could complete passes to Travis Kelce. He gets that wide open. How the hell does that happen? And what is Jonathan Gannon going to do about it?
First, I will say down the stretch last night, that was not the case. When all the wide receivers were hurt, they put like 3 people on Travis Kelce, and Mahomes was not able to find him. But you're right. I mean, from the beginning of the game, you're focusing on Travis Kelce. I think one thing I'm not a big X and O guy, but I think he's very, very strong off the line of scrimmage. He'll just shuck a defender, and get him behind him or get him on his, if he's going inside, he'll, get the guy outside of him. He's very great with his breaks. He's almost like a basketball forward. He can post up, he makes himself available. I don't know. He doesn't run. I mean, he runs very, very well, especially for a tight end, but he doesn't just run away from these people. he bodies them, he elbows them, he kind of he's very good at just positioning and knowing, and he and Mahomes have played together so much that they break off the routes. Like, there was one big catch they showed on a replay last night where he had run his normal route. It wasn't working, and he just improvised, and Mahomes found him, And at that point, the defender's like, wait a minute, I was covering him. What's he doing now? There's a lot of that in their offense. He's huge, he's strong, he's fast, and he's so smart. And I think that's the real added ingredient. He's just, both the Kelce brothers, if you've ever listened to their podcasts or listened to them, these are really intelligent people, especially football intelligence. And I think that's a huge part of his dominance.
Yeah. And what a great matchup. Donna Kelce, the first mother of brothers to play in the Super Bowl at Les Bowen. I was thinking about this. I'll end it here from my perspective with you, Les. We talked a little bit about Andy, and I'm with you. This is one of the 5 greatest coaches ever, Andy Reid. But he never got over the hump in Philadelphia. Doug Peterson, who's a very good coach, did. Nick Sirianni now has an opportunity. He's a very good coach, but they got a ways to go before they're going to catch up to Andy Reid, even with Super Bowl championships. In the we all don't know anything category, that's part of it. Then I was thinking about this. If you think about the Eagles' recent success, Les, the 2 backups for the guy who the Eagles thought was going to be the guy for a decade plus, one of them won a Super Bowl, Nick Foles. The other one, Jalen Hurts, got a chance to win a Super Bowl. This is amazing.
It really is.
To Philadelphia Eagles.
It's almost like Carson Wentz is cursed or something. I don't know. At this point, looking at his career, he brings it on himself to a large degree, but it's just, he can't, it's just unbelievable what's happened around him. And you're right. I'd give anything to know what he's thinking, wherever he is, with Jalen Hurts going to the Super Bowl this morning. It's just astounding. And no one ever envisioned this. You'll see a lot of revised history.
Oh, yeah. You see it already.
But we both know they wanted a cheap backup quarterback who was capable, more capable than Josh McCown.
Yeah.
And they thought, hey, second round, we can get this guy. He's probably not ever going to be our number 1, but rookie contract, he can go out there and run around and throw some passes, and we'll be better off than we were with Josh McCown for much less money. By the way,
did you see Jalen at his post-game press conference? He kind of alluded to the Eagles.
I'm sure he considers that a slight, deep down inside. Those are the things that athletes use to motivate them.
Sure.
But they made it clear, anybody who remembers the atmosphere 2 years ago, even when Nick Sirianni was hired, the idea, I mentioned this on Twitter and some people pushed back on me, but the idea at that moment was he was going to help Carson Wentz get back in the groove.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't until Carson said, no, I don't want anything to do with this, that the focus truly shifted long-term to Jalen Hurts. It wasn't those games he played at the end of the 2020 season. They were sort of okay, and they said, he did some nice things, good kid, very happy he did that, but they were not going to go with They were going to have a competition maybe, but they were not sold on Jalen Hurts. They weren't sold on Jalen Hurts at the end of last season, as we all know.
No, people pretend. The Eagles want you to forget. They were trying to convince Russell Wilson, hey, would you consider coming here? Deshaun Watson.
And they made sure they had 2 first-round picks again this year. Yep. They maneuvered to make that the case, just in case they needed to go out and get a quarterback.
Yep.
And the funny thing about it is, as you alluded to, Howie being the man in the middle. Yes, he was the guy who brought in Nick Foles to be there just in case. And shoot, we need Nick. How about winning us a Super Bowl? He does. He's the guy who used the second-round draft pick on a less expensive backup as a safety net just in case. Oh, guess what? Jalen Hurts can win them a Super Bowl as well. Genius, Howie Roseman. Except in the middle, he gave Carson Wentz a franchise quarterback contract. So I don't know how much credit we can give Howie. There's a whole bunch of credit we can give Howie. The genius of having the backup quarterback advance to Super Bowl winning championship quarterback. There's a little luck involved in that. I think we have to go there. All right, last one from me. Arizona, 13 days from now. Eagles taking it on the road. They went out there this year and won a game. Thank God the Eagles off-the-street kicker was better than the Cardinals off-the-street kicker. Dicker banged it home, whereas Amendola missed wide right, or it could have been a overtime game against the Cardinals. On that field, fast surface, advantage either of the two teams. We'll find out what Mahomes' foot is like. I don't think it's going to be an issue because if it was an issue yesterday, all he did was win the game for them. So does the placing of this year's Super Bowl in Arizona have an advantage for either of the two teams will be competing in the game?
Well, the Eagles have the better pass rush somewhat. So I think maybe them, but I don't know. I mean, it'll help. If you're right, if Mahomes is Mahomes, it'll help him as well. The fast surface.
Yeah.
You know, he'll be able to cut and dig and things like that. Maybe a little bit to the Eagles. The Eagles don't have a great history in that building.
No, they don't. They broke the big streak this year, but they didn't play well.
They didn't. It was one of their worst games of the season, really.
Yeah, they did not play well.
So that I think about that, but I just think this will be a good game. And I think you won't see anything like yesterday. I think you'll see points scored because I don't think this Kansas City defense is anywhere close to what the Eagles saw yesterday. It has some good players on it who can, get the ball and make plays for you defensively, but it doesn't have nearly the wall-to-wall strength that the 49ers had. I think the Eagles ought to be able to score points, but I'm afraid of, the Chiefs scoring points every drive. I think that's a possibility here too. It might be a lot like Super Bowl 52. Who knows? 41-33.
Speaking of, Jonathan Gannon was fired up, Les, after that win, giving up 14 points in the postseason.
Right.
I don't think they're going to score every time. I mean, this is a good defense. They gave up I think it was 0.9 more yards per game than the 49ers. That's how close they were. 1-2. This is a good defense.
When the game was competitive yesterday, I thought even Josh Johnson was able to complete passes underneath on like Kazir White and things like that. But, you're not going to.
That's the modern NFL, though. I mean,
I
everybody's going to be able to move the ball a little bit.
And that Pacheco is going to break some tackles and gain some yards. He's really a tremendous little running back. But, it'll be a great matchup. I think it'll be an even matchup. And I think, it's such an era in the Eagles' history right now to be talking about 2 Super Bowls in 5 years.
Nick Foles and Jalen Hurts. We all saw it coming. All of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Les, we appreciate you jumping in with us, getting us off on the right foot for the 2-week lead up to the Super Bowl. Thanks for getting up early with us today. We'll talk to you again soon, brother.
Thanks, you very much, guys. Take care.
Appreciate it.
Les Bowen, longtime Eagle beat reporter here with us.
Hey, Jody, I want to give you the exact quote from Jalen Hurts. My first year probably didn't even want me here. It was probably one of those things, but it always handles itself. Now, the Eagles added the annotation because they transcribed the quarterback and the head coach jokingly. He was not joking. He was not joking. They're trying to spin that. It was interesting because Jalen typically is very guarded, very, so for people who say, a lot of people like to go back to my history and say, point out things. I'm the first to raise my hand. I didn't think he'd ever turn into what he's turned into. And they think, that kind of stuff motivates Jalen Hurts. I think more so. He doesn't give a rat's what I think. he gives, I think that kind of stuff motivates him more than what reporters like me and media said 2 years ago when the Eagles. My point is, I've always said to fans who criticize reporters, not just me, but other reporters, your own team was looking to replace him. That's where the chip on the shoulder comes from. Your favorite team who's going to the Super Bowl was looking to replace him.
Right. Jokingly or not, Jalen's quote, I think, is inaccurate. The Eagles used a second-round draft pick on him. Shoot, here, Birds 365 didn't exist yet, but surely it was on WIP. What the hell is Howie Roseman doing? Why the hell would we need to waste the second-round pick on Jalen Hurts? We have we've got Carson. We've got other holes to fill. Why the hell are they taking a quarterback in the second round? Oh, no, Jalen, they used the second-round pick because they thought you could help the team. As a backup, there were no visions of you taking them to the Super Bowl in year 3 dancing in their head. But they wanted you to say they might not have even wanted. And of course they wanted you. They used a second-round pick on you.
Yeah, but from his perspective, Jody, it's a lot different. Like, he doesn't look at himself as a backup. As Les pointed out, and we know this from behind the scenes, trust me, we know this. They drafted him to be a backup. That's what he's talking about. That's what he thought. He always obviously thought of himself as a starting quarterback, as most people do. Most people are very competitive. So you're right from a standpoint. Nobody values the backup quarterback more than the Eagles.
Exactly.
Nobody values. But from his perspective, he doesn't give I'm using rat's ass too much today. He doesn't give a rat's ass about the history of this organization. He didn't consider himself a backup quarterback, and he knew he was pigeonholed as a backup quarterback. That was the plan. That's what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about.
That's perfectly fine that you're reading Jalen's mind, and you may very well be right, but Jalen Hurts is smarter than that, and he's more well-spoken than that. And if that's what he meant, that's what he should have said. He didn't. He just said, they didn't want me. No, they wanted you as a backup, as a safety net. And there was always the potential that something could hit, something could happen. You may get your chance. Oh, that's exactly what happened. And you can become the star that you are. He didn't say it that way yesterday, and he could have.
He could have, but again, you're right from a semantic standpoint. You and I get in this all the time. What matters is the sentiment. What matters is the sentiment and his feeling. And he uses it, what he feels disrespect, for a chip on his shoulder. That to me is the more important part than stating it artfully. Maybe he could have stated it more clearly, but in his perspective, pigeonholing him as a backup is something he uses. That's all I'm trying to point out.
Understood, but you're acknowledging you have to read into it to come up with that position, correct?
Well, I don't, because I know.
Well, you don't know, John. You don't know.
I do, because I talked to Jalen. I talked to Jalen off on the side. I do know, Jody. It's like the same thing. Like, you can believe reporters or not. What I just thought, I get it all the time. People say with Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson, they'd like to play this revisionist history game where it says, oh, you guys are just fooled by Howie Roseman. That didn't really happen. Like, I can't force people to believe reporters. You had Les saying it as well. There's a reason people like me and Les say the same thing in situations like that. We do have information that other people don't have that we can't talk about on. Now, people can believe it or not believe it. That's fine. I don't care. That's up to the person. But we do have more access than the average person, and we do get to talk to these people behind the scenes and get into it. Jalen, wasn't happy. He was earmarked to be a backup. Just like Carson Wentz, by the way, wasn't happy that they brought in such an accomplished backup, an accomplished young backup. It works sort of both ways, but he uses it. And if he uses it and it works, that's only worked out for the Eagles.
Correct.
So from my standpoint, it's all good. It's not like he he dislikes the organization, but that original intent bothers him and he uses it. That's all I'm trying to say.
I never saw him say that about Saban, who forced him to transfer to Oklahoma because he chose Tua Tagovailoa as him as their starting quarterback. But however it works for Jalen, he's making it work, and he's got the Eagles in the Super Bowl 13 days from now. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Hour down of Birds 365, hour to go, including an appearance from our buddy from NJ.com. Chris Franklin's going to jump in about 15 minutes here on Birds 365.